TexAgs Rewind on a Monday morning. Ryan Brauny in the host chair for the final time. David Nuno returns tomorrow. Pretty busy show. Started with OB. Talked a lot of Aggie basketball. Closer than probably minute he had hoped for on Saturday night. 6-point win over Vandy, but it ain't a beauty not a beauty contest. So we had OB on the show. We had Jim Schlossnagle on for a segment as the Aggie baseball team has started practices in preparation for their 2023 season. We had Liucci on. We had Logan came in as a surprise.
Tom Hart?
Yes, Tommy Hart. He's a big Culver's fan. And
the taste of the South in your mouth.
That's what happens. When you eat Culver's, when I eat Culver's, it's an inside joke. You have to work here to get it.
Or watch the rewind. You might get it.
Yeah, watch the rewind. Here it is.
They did not follow their usual recipe for success. They showed you they can cook the meal from a different recipe. They didn't clamp down Vanderbilt in the first half and keep them to, like 25 points or something. They didn't shoot great at the free throw line, especially down the stretch where they were, I think, 50% and 5 of 10. And Julius Marble was kind of a non-factor.
He was due a bad one.
Right. I mean, but because he's been so in games they've won, they've gotten really good performances from Julius. Mm-hmm. They've shot well at the free throw line, gotten there a lot, and shot a high percentage, and they've just dominated on the defensive end in the first half. They didn't do any of those things and still won.
Sure, and like you said, you got to have a lot of different ways to bake the cake, and I think this team found their identity way earlier than last year's team. And we talked about maturity on the road to manage that game out against Auburn against their 28-game home winning streak, and with the students on top of you, and just being able to manage the game there in the second half. And I said it was going to take a little bit of maturity for them to bounce back, not have a hangover, and win the game against Vanderbilt. And I'm not real sure that it mattered how they played. And I'm not sure it matters how they play the rest of the way if you keep stacking these wins.
Yeah, well, of course it doesn't. It's just, but sometimes you have to find another way to do it. My man to my right, Ryan Brauny, also Nostradamus, said Friday that Henry Coleman was due a big game. Look for Henry Coleman. And Henry Coleman made a profit out of you. He went out there, what, about 18 points?
18 and 6. I will say, a broke clock is right twice a day. So please do not start pulling up predictions that I've made in the past.
Take your victory lap.
Well, we both agree that Henry Coleman, we like him as a human being. We think he's an important piece of that team because of his personality, all that kind of stuff. So I think whenever you watch A&M play and you understand what kind of kid Henry Coleman is, and then you listen to Buzz in the postgame when he talked about when Anderson Garcia was getting a lot of Henry's minutes. Was it at Auburn? I believe it was he was referencing.
Or one of those games. Yeah, I think so.
But how Henry Coleman was the biggest, loudest cheerleader for Anderson during that game. When, in my experience in sports, when kids do that kind of thing, they're setting themselves up for their own personal success. So that's why I just felt like there was a big night coming for Henry Coleman.
Well, here's the thing that impressed me about Henry Coleman. Again, was one of your better players last year, was a preseason all-SEC selection. And last night showed you why with 18 and 6. And he's just playing well, shooting a high percentage, everything. Just play. And yet his role had been reduced because of Julius Marble's presence and other things. Mm-hmm. And you've never heard him complain. They just go out and win. And he plays hard every game. He's not – he could be saying, that's what I could be doing every night if they, Mm-hmm. But no, he just goes out and does what he needs to do to win. And they sometimes don't need him to score 18 points. But by gosh, they needed everything they could get from him against Vanderbilt, and he gave it.
Are you kind of excited about the prospects of getting these pitchers some seasoning against those guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough on – there's no question it's tough on the pitchers when you're – there's nothing you're going to throw to Austin Boast or Brett Minnick or Jack Moss or Trevor Werner that those guys haven't seen. And and they're, for the most part, they're not in a hurry to hit. So if you're not going, they control the strike zone. So if you're not going to be a strike thrower, or you're going to be fringy around the strike zone, and it's going to be a long day, man. And then when they do swing, and I've said to you before, the goal of our offense is to swing the least, but when we do swing, to do the most damage. And that's not to be, not to be aggressive. It's to be aggressive on our pitch. So it does put a lot of pressure on those newer pitchers, the guys, who return, the Nathan Detmer, Chris Cortez, Brad Rudis, Will Johnston, those guys aren't phased. They fill the strike zone up for the most part. But the new guys are, they're going through a transition, and at times they look great, and other times they get their doors blown in. So, we'll see. Hopefully they'll keep getting better. I know they will, because we're certainly not going to go very far if we don't pitch and play defense. That, the way we pitched and played defense last year, that's not sustainable baseball for the long term, and we need to be better in those areas.
How might fans that come to the game, they're going to see different versions of some of their favorite players? And I know by going out there and watching the last few days that some of these guys have made significant strides in the weight room. So physically, you guys are going to look different. But kind of what is the progression for a Brett Minnick or a Jordan Thompson from last year to this year?
Well, for Minnick, he's healthy. I don't think any of us, even him, we didn't realize how he played incredibly injured all last year. We thought it was just kind of a hip flexor strain, and he was trying to work through and end up being a pretty serious sports hernia. And Brett can run. I mean, he's not going to steal a ton of bases, but in terms of going first to third or scoring from first base on a double or covering ground in the outfield, knock on wood, you're seeing him move better, a whole heck of a lot better now, and that's with 20 extra pounds.
Do you like the timing of the SEC Big 12 Challenge with it being in the middle of the conference slate, or would you rather see them move that up, maybe one weekend of pre-conference play, have all that go down?
I got to say, I haven't liked the timing historically, but this weekend kind of opened my eyes a little bit, right? I've always said that there are several different opening days to college basketball. There's the first day, November 7th or 9th, whatever that is. But that's obviously you're going head-to-head with college football and everything else at that same time. The World Series just ended. And then the college football regular season wraps up and more fans come to college basketball. And then the bowl season and the national championship ends and even more fans come over to hoops. And then you get to this past weekend and the Super Bowl, where casual sports fans start to pay more attention. The football schedule is so light this weekend, obviously, that it opened up all of Saturday for the SEC and the Big 12 to take center stage. And I thought that was a great platform for both leagues. So I really liked it this year. Now it's going away, and it's going to be the ACC and SEC. And the talk is, and I don't know if this has been publicized yet, but the talk is that they're going to move it to that week right after Thanksgiving. And once again, there's room in the calendar for that, right? Like we're building up to the SEC football championship. It's only two teams. It's only two fan bases. Even though it takes up a lot of bandwidth from media coverage standpoint, you get Tuesday, Wednesday of that week with, let's say Duke coming to Kentucky or, North Carolina playing at Tennessee or vice versa. Like there's an opportunity for some really big games between those two leagues. And the other change that is a positive is where multiple teams have to sit out in the current format. You have the same number of teams in the SEC and ACC, and everybody's playing in the challenge, which is, I think, more appealing also.
I think the difference, though, in the Adazio one, and people kept wondering about that, but Adazio was lined up for a while. There were just some entanglements there with him getting out. The way the setup was with Colorado State having fired him, and, there's always something going there contractually when those type of things happen. So that was more of that. Like Adazio behind the scenes, it was Adazio and it was Cyril's at North Carolina, who ended up at Georgia after A&M hired. Basically, the Aggies had their pick there, and they went in with Adazio early on, and that one kept going from the standpoint of just getting it across the finish line only. And no, I do not in any way believe that there's someone that they're out there just trying to get across the finish line for a long period of time, like Elko, who had kind of agreed already, like Durkin, who I think they knew they were going to get once Ole Miss's bowl game was over. You mentioned Adazio, so nothing like that. So if you're wondering if I wonder if Billy's just sitting on one and keeping it quiet, the answer is no. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be something as quickly as tomorrow or in the next couple of days, but as of right now, no, they haven't been, there's not a guy that's just been teed up and lined up, ready to go. It's just a matter of not who, but when. That's not the case, I don't believe, on either side. But I do think the defensive one, I know they've talked to Partridge at Ole Miss, and I know there's a line of thinking in Bright that there could be a promotion from within type of thing.
Dalton?
Brauny?
What are they supposed to do?
You can like, you can comment, subscribe, and tell your friends about it.
Everybody. Tell everybody that Ryan Brauninger is no longer hosting TexAgs Radio. Nuno's back tomorrow.